Okay, raise your hand if you've ever dealt with anxiety, whether diagnosed or just that pit of your stomach, sleeplessness kind. Anxiety can absolutely wreak havoc on our lives. Today on the Mindrise podcast, I will be joined by best-selling author Corinne Zupko to talk about spiritual tools for healing anxiety. Corinne is the author of the best-selling and four-time award-winning book, From Anxiety to Love. She began her work with A Course in Miracles in 1997 after struggling from multiple anxiety disorders, and now lives free from debilitating anxiety solely due to the course. So we're going to learn a lot about A Course in Miracles. It's new to me, so she's going to educate us on that and how that's brought her through her path. Corinne is a keynote speaker, an adjunct professor of counselor education, a board-certified coach, and a mindfulness meditation teacher. Like myself, she has a background in mental health. So we're going to kind of talk about how science and spirituality merge together as well. The other cool thing that we're doing is we're going to be doing a book giveaway. So you can win your copy of From Anxiety to Love. So be sure to check out the show notes to win your signed copy. We're going to be doing that. And I'm really excited about that because this book is amazing. It's filled with tons of tools, as well as like Corinne's own journey. And she has had quite a journey, both marrying the concepts of mental health alongside of spirituality. So in the meantime, remember to subscribe so that you get all the latest episodes as soon as they are released on Apple, Spotify, Google, and we're on YouTube. And here we go. Yay! Miss Corinne Zupko, everyone. She's here, we're here, let's do this.
Bailey, thank you for having me. I love you. I love the show, and I'm really honored to be here.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm super excited to have you on, not only for having been connected to you for years and, watched your journey, but I'm really excited for you to kind of talk about your journey because so much of what we talk about on the podcast is like where you were and where you are now and how you made that climb. But not only did you have a journey, but then you wrote it in a best-selling book. From Anxiety to Love, everybody. And we'll make sure we put that in the podcast notes for sure. But Corinne, you've had quite a journey. What was the catalyst that took you from where you were to where you are now?
There are so many ways that I can answer that question depending on the time of my life, because I will give you the answer of then to now and the latest, a few weeks ago till now answer, because they're different. And obviously the book writing journey is its own whole experience also. The catalyst for where I was back then to where I am now, really, if I boil it down, it was intense psychological pain. That was the motivating force that lit that fire in me to find something that would help me, because I write about this, I'm very open about my history. I had been diagnosed, I can't remember the number, at least 4 different anxiety disorders, starting at a very young age, through college into adulthood. And it was only through finding a spiritual pathway that worked for me. In my case, my spiritual pathway is based on the book, A Course in Miracles. Whatever our spiritual pathway is, it took me deep diving into a spiritual pathway to find something in myself that I could trust, that I could rely on, that I could listen to, not you call it the Charlie Brown, what, not that voice. That's not the voice I'm talking about to listen to. We listen to that, really well. We're experts at listening to that voice. There's a deeper voice in all of us that whatever we call it, however we conceptualize it, it's there for all of us. And it took that pain for me to do that deep dive, to find that inner voice, and to be on this journey of really recognizing that I can trust it in all circumstances. I can trust it in life. I can trust it in business. I can trust it in relationships. I can trust it absolutely everywhere. So this journey has been ever deepening in following that voice, because it's taken me to places and into projects and into doing things that I never expected to, because I feel that I am just following my inner guidance, my, I call it in my book, your inner therapist. You can call it your intuition, whatever it is that we call that voice, that putting that in charge and centering that in all things has really made it a journey. So it's the short version of that, of my answer to your question is inner pain was the catalyst to really finding a relationship with a very deep part of my capital S self, not my small s self, which is that Charlie Brown. Wah, wah, wah.
It's so true. And I know it's always like, don't you wish that my questions I started with like, oh, what's your favorite ice cream? Like, where was your first kiss? And I'm like, okay, well, let's start right where, all the action happens. But, Corinne, I'd love for you to kind of share with us, because I think that, and if I may share a bit about Corinne's background as well. And I know you guys heard her formal bio, but Corinne's also a mental health practitioner by education and training. So we both come from, and if I'm speaking out of turn here, Corinne, you let me know, but we both come from the like, show me the study, show me the proof, show me the evidence, show me the longitudinal evidence. I need it to be qualitative and quantitative data. I'm going to need all the data in order to, say what it is and say that like the treatment plan, like that was our training, right? So for us to be having a conversation right now, which I'm so excited about, of like, hey, so spirituality is going to support us, and spirituality is going to be a key ingredient, if not like the key, the tool that we use to navigate our anxiety from being up here and bring it on down and take the wheel of your life. So I'm super curious for you, like, how were you able to marry almost those two concepts, like what our education and our background was, and also like integrate the concepts of spirituality? And then, because I can't help myself but like ask multiple questions at once, do you think that it also is worth the discussion of like, how do we define spirituality?
Yeah, those are all great questions, and there's so much in there that you just said, because coming from an academic background, it was scary as heck for me to start my blog, for me to start putting myself out there as somebody who not only was a licensed mental health professional, but had mental health issues herself, and to be writing about spiritual principles that were helpful in this, which is so far removed. I still am an adjunct professor and in a counselor ed department. And when I came out with my book, I was really nervous about how the faculty, how everybody would receive it. They have a shout out in the back of my book. They were amazing and so incredibly supportive. But I love science and spirituality, and they start to come together when we look into fields like quantum physics and a lot of this, unexplainable, very deep, things in the universe and all sorts of cool stuff. So there is, I've always had a lot of interest there. It was a scary thing to come out and to start talking about this, but really Buddha was a scientist. His experiment was to look deeply into his own experience. So he was like an early scientist in terms of studying his own experience deeply. And we can really learn from that, because our own experience is our greatest teacher. And as we start to look very closely at our experience, there's so much that we can learn. Now, I'm very middle of the road when it comes to things like medication. Like I've needed it at times in my life, and I have had no hesitation in relying on it when I've needed it. But when I first struggled with anxiety, when I first started breaking down with those panic attacks when I was back in college, I knew if I went on medication then, that I'd never want to come off of it. Like that I needed to look deeply into my experience at that time to see where the source of the relief would come from. And that's why I knew that spirituality was like where I needed to go, because of that scientific exploration, that looking in of my own experience. Later that I had episodes where I did need some support with medication, but I think it's all about, really, really tuning in. And we tend to be so busy and have such fast lives and be so on the go that we miss a lot of data. Our bodies tell us things, we get signals from our body that like, we need to slow down, we need to pay attention. So really becoming your own scientist and looking within with what works for you. This is why, I mean, I will tell you that in my Course in Miracles study group in more recent times, I've been talking about angels, and I still am like, who is this girl saying these things? Because this is just very unnatural for me because of my background and because of my training. And yet, when I have experiences of these things, when I have experiences that are unexplainable, that are so synchronistic and like that could not have just happened by chance, those experiences build my trust. They are so affirming in this idea that we do have this inner guidance system, that there is this presence beyond what we see with our physical eyes, and the synchronicities just further, build that trust. And we all get them. We don't always notice them, again, because we're so on the go and we're moving so fast. But I would really encourage everybody listening to start becoming your own scientist and start to really look deeply into your experience. And when you have experiences that do seem like a synchronicity, to really slow down, write about it, be with it. And I have so many stories just about, those synchronous experiences. And they've been key. The link here with anxiety is that they have nurtured my relationship with my inner guidance system, which has taught me that there, as I've said already, there is in fact much more happening behind the scenes than what we're aware of. And knowing that, the anxiety has just gone thunk, like so down, I mean, it's been a journey, believe me, but it's, what do we call it? An inverse correlation, the more, the more these experiences happen, the lower the anxiety gets. So this is what all of my work is about now, is just being very, very spirit centered, spirit driven, spirit focused, and really listening to that inner voice within in everything that I do. And the interesting things that we often might get nervous that it's going to take us to places that like we're not ready for. And I've been doing some very surprising, I've gotten involved in projects that I didn't expect to get involved in. So it can take you into, uncharted waters, but in a very, in a way that that if you're guided into a specific pathway or to do something specific, it's the right thing because it came from your guidance. So it all helps to develop trust and decrease anxiety. So,
well, I love that perspective of like becoming our own scientist. I think that at least for me and so many of the clients that I've worked with over the years, I'm sure for yourself as well, that, it almost can feel like life is running by like a speeding bullet train. And therefore, everything that's happening from side to side is almost this blur. And we're not like always intentional and cognizant of some of the patterns or the habits or that cycle that we can get stuck in sometimes. So I think that you make a really good point when we say like, hey, be a scientist, notice these patterns, study yourself. And that's not to the point of, which at least I can be guilty of, where we make ourselves crazy. We're like, right. I've overthought this completely. Right. But instead that concept of like being a scientist, studying ourselves and examining like, what am I learning? What am I observing?
And how am I feeling? So that's the key piece too, because we can get, believe me, as somebody with an anxiety background, we can get very into our heads, with overthinking things and be like, is this the right way or is that the right way? Like, what do I do here? And yet it's about tuning into a different channel in our body. So I like to think, we have that in A Course in Miracles. It's the ego. So it's fear, which is the ego, or love, which is spirit, Holy Spirit, whatever word you want to call it. And they speak on different channels. So that want voice is going to be on the head channel. At least it is for me. It's very thought focused. It's very heady. It's very up here. The guidance that I experience when I'm tuned in, it does not come from up here. It's somewhere down here. It's somewhere in my core. It's in my gut. So it's tuning in to a different channel and not getting caught, because that ego can get in there and, like you said, overthink anything and start to get obsessive and be lost in that, but it's about tuning into a different channel, a different part of the body, sensing wherever you get that guidance, really trying to tune into that different channel.
So I've heard you mention A Course in Miracles a couple times, and while you know what that means and I know what that means, let's start to like really educate and bring everybody up to speed on A Course in Miracles. Where did that come from? What drew you to A Course in Miracles as your path, and even like how do you integrate A Course in Miracles with anxiety?
Great questions. Well, that's what my book is all about. So if you're interested in learning about A Course in Miracles and anxiety, pick up my book, because I really wrote it obviously for advanced students who are struggling with anxiety, but also for newbies who just want to know more about what the course is about. So the course is a book. A Course in Miracles is a book. Interestingly, it came through, it's a dictated, a process of inner dictation. So channeled work, which again, scientist in me is like, can't believe you're saying this, but it came through a woman. Her name was Helen Schuckman, and her co-scribe Bill Thetford. They were actually professors of psychology in Columbia University in a very conflict-ridden department. And they basically, the two of them agreed that there's got to be another way. And they didn't know in this declaration of there's got to be another way, that opened a door in both of them, where Helen started hearing this inner voice, and she had experiences leading up to this, that started with saying, this is A Course in Miracles, please take notes. So the book itself is not an easy read. It's, as you get into it, you really can see how no physical mind could have written this, because it's teaching a different thought system. The thought system that dictates this whole planet is the thought system of fear. And A Course in Miracles is about learning to listen to, as I've been talking about with this inner guidance, listen to the voice of love, which exists in all of us and is outside time and space. So a miracle, there's two definitions of a miracle. The most frequently referred to definition in the course is that miracles are expressions of love, because love is literally what we are made of. It is who we are. And as we have loving impulses that come up from within us and we express them, we are performing miracles. We are extending that love outward, and that love can join with another who, it lightens them up as well. And miracles are also shifts in perception. So they change our mind from fear to love. So the entire course is about this, learning this new thought system that comes from within. And there are 3 parts to the book. There's a text, there's a workbook with a lesson for every day of the year. And then in the back of the book, there is a manual for teachers, which is more like a Q&A type of format. So the book is a journey, and it's something that I have never really put down. It's the foundation of everything that I do. And yet, at the same time, one of the characteristics in A Course in Miracles, it says one of the characteristics of a teacher of God, because we're all teachers in some way, shape, or form, one of the characteristics is open-mindedness. And I've been in this place most recently of holding all of these spiritual teachings very lightly and letting, again, my inner guidance lead the way and letting that really be the teacher. And so my second answer to your earlier question, when I said, what got me from then to now, the more recent then, just even a few weeks ago to now, is just even more deeply centering spirit within, spirit in everything, and letting that guide my every step. So yeah, the course is a book, and it's why I'm here smiling today and not medicated and a pile on the floor. So I'm grateful. I'll be grateful my entire life that pathway, that spiritual pathway exists.
Well, and again, I'm sure that everybody listening, whether it's A Course in Miracles or it's a book that you read or a quote that stuck with you or an experience that you had or a teacher or a person or a parent or a partner, like whatever, we've all had something that has come across our path. And like, we're going to take a piece of that with us wherever we go forever and ever, because at least in my mind, I think sometimes then that piece feels like home, and you're like, oh, that's for me. Okay.
Mhm.
Like, and that's going to be part of me. And you come with me for life. And this sounds good. But Corinne, would you say that somebody has to read A Course in Miracles or be really familiar with A Course in Miracles in order to read your book, From Anxiety to Love?
No, no,
Okay.
no. My book is actually a great introduction to the course. So if you resonate with the teachings in my book, then that might be a nice doorway into, further study, because the course itself is kind of a commitment. It's easy to pick it up and put it right down and never pick it up again, because again, the language can be so difficult. It's almost like you're reading a different language, but it comes, I always say, if you do feel moved to get the book, just to not worry about the parts that you don't understand. Just keep going. And that's how I studied it for years. I would just open it at random, not understand probably 75% of what I was reading, but there was something in me that was still like, yes, even if I only understood a small part, it was still like working behind the scenes. So it's important to not get frustrated if we think we're not getting it or we don't fully understand, because we're not going to fully understand. It's a totally different pathway.
So I know that, we're going to put the link to From Anxiety to Love in the show notes, but I'd love for you to kind of share with us. So what are a few of the tools from anxiety to love that can help us to go from that state of fear or anxiety, especially like from so many of us, we've felt shut down or like shrunken, dimming our light, especially with navigating a pandemic and navigating massive changes and transitions. Some of us just like feeling shell-shocked of the trauma and disbelief of what we've navigated. And now, as so many of us are trying to emerge or reclaim ourselves, what are some of those tools that we can use to go from this anxiety to being in love or presence or grounded?
That's a great question. So some of just the general teachings that were so helpful to me from A Course in Miracles, I've included in the book. Teachings like of course, this is going to sound like I'm contradicting myself, but I'm just going to throw this out there. First of all, these very like non-dual metaphysical teachings that we're not bodies, that this world is actually a dream, that we're still safe at home in truth, but like we're kind of dreaming this physical experience. And yet the temptation is to like get very heady with that and to deny our experience. Whereas the opposite is the case. It's by being in our bodies and being in our experience that we learn that we're not bodies, that we learn that this is a dream. So there's a very divine paradox here. So just some of those types of general teachings that are different than how we typically think are helpful. I'm a big fan of meditation. There's lots of meditations in the book to help us step out of fear and tune into that loving voice instead. My healing recipe that I talk about in the book, and I also talk about a lot in my From Anxiety to Love masterclass, is the basic principles, again, from A Course in Miracles, but that it's all about finding our willingness. So this is the recipe: finding our willingness to see something differently, whether it's anxiety or fear or a conflict that we're involved in. Finding your willingness, and finding your willingness to see it differently might mean that, like, let's say you're having a conflict with somebody at work. Am I willing to see it differently? Well, if I'm radically honest, I talk a lot about radical honesty and how important it is to be so honest with ourselves and with spirit. Am I really willing to see that person differently who's being a schmuck? No. But I can ask myself, okay, am I willing to see them differently? I'm willing to be willing. So there's my tiny bit of willingness. So that's step one, is find that willingness. The next step is to offer that willingness to spirit within, saying, basically, Spirit, I'm handing this over to you. I want the miracle instead. I want that shift. Because everything that we give over to our inner guidance system, we're not just letting it go like we tend to think about, just releasing something to the universe. It's an exchange. You're releasing fear and asking for an exchange, for love to come back, for a different perception to come back, for some experience to come back to be that teacher. So that's the second step, is really turning it over and asking for the miracle. And then the last step, which can be the hardest, is to really trust that it's done, that you've now repurposed this situation. You've asked to see it differently. And that perception, that new perception will come to you when you are ready. And then, of course, I get into all the ways, if nothing happens, if you do these steps and it's like crickets, there's other things that we can do, like looking at where we are unwilling to heal. Because if we're honest with something with anxiety, we have to look, what are the positive payoffs to keeping the anxiety? Like that's looking at our unwillingness to heal. Unwillingness, another term for that is, resistance to change. I'm going to get academic again, psychological resistance to change. Freud called it the death instinct. So where we're looking at, our unwillingness to heal, once we can find that and see that, then that becomes something that we can hand over and ask, to see that differently too. So there's lots of ways with working, if nothing seems to happen. But the key here is to build a habit of talking to your inner guidance system, of tuning into your inner guidance system. That really is what the whole book is about, and all of my work, and even A Course in Miracles. It's about making spirit, again, in whatever way you conceptualize that, it's making that a habit. That whether I talk to spirit, I'll be like, help me with this. That's my most common prayer is help. Making that part, that inner guidance system, spirit, our inner therapist, making that a habit. Because as we make that a habit, it becomes, again, this deepening relationship, this ever deepening relationship with this deeper part of ourselves, which reinforces, again, and it'll bring about experiences that teach us that this is real. We all have this inner guidance system that we can rely on, and we are here. I feel this so deeply, that we are here to love and to extend love and to reflect the perfect equality of the universe, to have that reflected here on this planet.
Oh, so many things come up for me as I'm listening to you, Corinne, because I'm with you. Like, if everybody who's listening can just like go back to a memory that they had of like being in love, like that first beginning, like what they say, like drunk in love feeling. And I always equate it to that feeling of like being in love, like the schnozberries taste like schnozberries. Like everything comes with like a nice little extra step, and we're like extra nice to everybody. We're like leaving bigger tips, or, buying coffee for the person in the line behind us. We're just like, the birds are chirping, and I'm pretty sure like, a chipmunk could like come out of the bush and they would be able to talk to us, because everything's like magical, right? Mm-hmm. But I just think about like that feeling is not because of another person. Mm-hmm. That feeling is evoked because of an interaction, sure. Mm-hmm. But that feeling is always within us. Mm-hmm. And we have the capacity to ignite that. I find for myself, at least for the last 38 years, that when my birthday rolls around, that day feels like, and it's in November, so it's not always sunshiny, but it just feels like extra sunshiny. I'm like, whoo, it's my birthday. It's all y'all's birthday. It's everybody's birthday. You want cake? You get cake. We all get cake, right? And I just feel like super lit up. And then the next day it could be just like, November 10th. And I'm like, well, it's November 10th. Mm-hmm. But on that day, like these things get ignited with us. Mm-hmm. So what I hear you saying is like that place of love, it always resides in. Mm-hmm. And we can access it even more so by connecting with our intuition, connecting with our higher self, connecting with spirit, whatever resonates for us. But what I'm curious to ask you, because at least I find for me, when there's a lot of noise and static, like it just, my head feels foggy, and it feels like it's harder to access that place. So I loved when you talked about like the resistance to change. And if you could kind of talk to us a little bit more about that, like, would that be the fog that we have to try and clear? And how do we clear that fog so that we could step out of resistance and edge ourselves more toward willingness? Because, and I'll shut up in a second, but where I'm going with this is that I think that, at least in my mind, sometimes we are initially unwilling because our like protector shield comes up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what allows us to like soften and not put that shield up? Like, what's the narrative that we think we have to always be protected?
Right, right. That's a big question and such a good question. Oh my goodness, there's so many directions that I can go with this. But the first thing that's coming up for me is to recognize that in our vulnerability, we find our shared invulnerability, that by being so authentic and vulnerable, and like if you're scared, if you feel so protected, being vulnerable about that, being honest about that, you know, confiding in a friend or a family member, a partner, even just confiding in your inner therapist. Like, you know, again, going back to this idea of making spirit a habit, making your inner guidance a habit. Journaling, I'm such a big fan of journaling and getting it out, you know, on paper. That's one way that we can be really authentic and really vulnerable, is just writing out, you know, exactly what's coming up. But, you know, the thing with A Course in Miracles and with all of my work is that this, with the Course, it's all about seeking and finding the blocks that are in the way of the love that's already there, that you just spoke about. It's there all the time, but we layer it with layers of fear. I am co-host of a program called The Love Lens, which is conversations about A Course in Miracles and racism, because the risk with a lot of these teachings, like we're not bodies, the world is a dream, is to use denial in a very unhealthy way. Especially if you're in a white body and have white body privilege, you know, ignoring the experiences of other Black and brown bodies and the very real experiences that they're having in our country. One of my co-hosts, Freedom Cartwright, shares a story that one of her first meditation teachers used to say that some of the happiest people that he knows have been people who've spent the most time looking at their shadow, looking at the fear thoughts, the judgmental thoughts, that which is, you know, that which we want to bury. What we want to bury and hide, you know, we're usually protecting because we're afraid if like part of us is seen because of those, you know, buried parts, that if that's seen, because some of it's ugly. I mean, using myself as an example, have all sorts of judgmental thoughts and all sorts of, you know, I mean, we're human beings. We have this voice of fear in our mind. And the Course even teaches, it's not that you're going to stop having those judgmental thoughts. It's that you have none that you would keep. Again, it's all about seeing them, recognizing them, handing them over. So to answer your question, being willing to look at that which we would rather keep hidden. Meditation is a great way because since we're so busy and on the go, when we pause and begin to get quiet, oftentimes that which we want to keep out of consciousness starts showing up. So that can just be a way to start to allow, you know, that which is within to come out, because that's not the real part of who we are. That's not our true self at all. Those are all the layers of fear. And we're afraid if it's seen, it will be judged, will be rejected. But instead, the best thing to do, and you know, there's so many Course in Miracles quotes about this, it's about looking. It's about looking at those judgmental thoughts, those fearful thoughts, those thoughts that we would rather deny. Because by looking, it's almost like you're exhuming that which, you know, we're hiding, we're bringing it up for healing. Right. And then there's a clearing there. And we start to recognize that love is not only within us, it's within every living thing that we see. It's in the planets, it's in plants, it's in animals, it's in other people. And the more we can spend, even, you know, I mentioned racism, looking at our biases, looking at, in a white body, unconscious supremacy. I might not think that it's in me, but if I start looking deeply and exhuming this, you know, this is a pathway that I will be committed to for the rest of my life, is looking at my, you know, biases and doing this type of work. It's what's required, you know, for healing, for healing. So did I answer your question?
You're like me. It's like, once that brain goes, there's so much to share, because, and I love what you're talking about. it's that we have to be conscious of it, and we bring it to the forefront. Stop shoving it in the back of the closet and thinking that that's going to make it go away. Like the goal
Right.
is not
Right.
for fear and anxiety to disappear. Instead, it's like, it's confronting it. And at least in my mind, not letting it drive the bus.
Right.
When anxiety and fear are driving the bus, I always call it like the drunk monkey. Like no one wants a drunk monkey driving the bus. Like the
No.
drunk monkey cannot be in charge. Right. And instead seeing that that's not our actual voice, that instead we take the wheel. I'm picking up what you're putting down there, kid. So I'm also curious for you, if you don't mind sharing with us what's behind the kimono, but like, what was one of, or is one of your biggest fears, and how did you overcome it?
Ooh, I love that question. Biggest fear. Well, I'd have to go with my number one anxiety trigger, which was health fears. So that was the thing that sparked the initial panic attacks when I was in college. I had a pattern, a very entrenched pattern for a very long time, that if there was something off in my body, I'd go from calm to panicked in a snap, and the worst case scenario. Like it wasn't just, something mild. It was always the absolute worst thing that you could find on Google. Google will reflect the fear in your mind. If you have a physical symptom and you look it up and you're afraid, Google will reflect the fear that's in the mind. So that's been a very significant fear pattern in my life. And that's a lot, again, of what my book is about. This healing work, and even recognizing that I can trust my inner guidance system, that if there is a symptom showing up and I'm maybe going to need medical attention, I'll be guided to go get that medical attention, that I don't have to, immediately do that knee-jerk type of panic. And of course, there's more to that, because I do believe that a lot of this work has been the root of some of the physical healings, that have showed up in my life. And those are, some quite miraculous stories. But that pattern, I would say now I equate it to like a whisper or a residue, where I might see whispers of it show up, but my response is much different than how it used to be in the past. So in this entire pandemic, although again, I've been very privileged with being home a lot, being able to work from home, my mental state throughout this time has been significantly different. If I look back at the swine flu, if you remember the swine flu outbreak in, I don't know what year that was, a completely different person. I was petrified and panicked to even if I wasn't leaving my house, that level of anxiety and fear was still super high. So to be able to report progress, to be able to say, I don't meet criteria for those anxiety disorders anymore, is something that I'm forever grateful for. And it's what keeps me focused on this pathway, because I'm committed to that healing of fear, to restore that awareness of the love that's within, not just for my personal benefit, but to be able to extend it to others as well.
Right. And I love that rearview mirror perspective, Corinne, when it's like we can look back, and it's not a matter of like looking back in time as like, that is the capacity with which I have, but instead like looking back and saying, wow, look how far I've come. Mm-hmm. Because back in the days of the swine flu, I was crippled. Mm-hmm. And that's just one example, but I was crippled at that time based on my inner narrative, based on the tools that I had at hand, and I imagine, at that time doing the best that you could. And to kind of look at yourself in this, like, wow, I've navigated this pandemic that should have put me in a puddle on the floor. Mm-hmm. And a past version of myself would have been a puddle on the floor. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And now saying like, I've come a long way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we have to be able to celebrate that. Yeah. We have to be able to celebrate when we do see that progress. We also have to be careful, because that inner critic, that fearful voice can get in there and be like, oh, you should be further along than you are. You're still struggling. Like, that voice will try to get in there however it can. And A Course in Miracles actually says, like, resign as your own. Like, you can't even judge your own progress. You judge some of your greatest gains as
Mhm.
failures, and you judge some of your setbacks as like, oh, look at me, so don't even bother trying to just judge your experience, but instead just be in your life, be in our, this is also part of, what I teach and what A Course in Miracles teaches, is that our life is our curriculum. Our life is designed to help us heal, to help direct us back to love. And so we can trust that we are exactly where we need to be for our growth and learning right now. Whatever is happening, is an opportunity. It's an opportunity for learning, for growth, for using your voice, for speaking up. Those are just some of the ways that it has shown up for me.
I love it. I love it. And that's so true. So taking those tools, taking what you've learned, all the ways in which you've grown so far, what is next for you as you elevate your life? Like, what's next for you as you look down the next 6 months, year ahead, even beyond? What is next for you as you elevate?
Well, that's an interesting question, because about a year, probably more like 2 years ago, I started getting a very distinct sense that I was going to be guided into not just teaching about A Course in Miracles and anxiety, that it was going to expand. I did not know that that would be moving into the realm of, bringing A Course in Miracles, a conversation surrounding Course in Miracles and racism together. Now, I still feel this same type of energy, almost like things, and many people feel this is not just me, that there's just so much happening behind the scenes that it's almost like our bodies are trying to like catch up, like things are shifting in a big energetic way. And we're all, those of us who feel moved to be miracle workers or light workers in this world, we have work to do. We have literal work to do to be able to extend love to the planet. So it's hard for me to say where I am going. What I do know is that I will be coming out this fall with my From Anxiety to Love masterclass, which is really super exciting. I do know that the Love Lens conversations will be made available for people who want to join that program. The program's currently not finished. We have 3 episodes to go, but we do have, a waiting list. I get the sense that, I'm just going to say it, that a book will be coming out of that endeavor. And I don't know how, when, it's just a gut, felt sense. And I know that I'll be doing more with my co-hosts, Freedom and Pastor Yolanda Batts of the Celebration Spiritual Center. So that's part of the difficult thing, especially for someone like me getting coached. It can be probably somewhat frustrating to I'm so guidance focused that it's sometimes hard to see, because where I'll be in a year, because I haven't been told yet. That hasn't been made clear to me yet, but I'm tuning in and asking and just trusting that every step of the way will lead to the next thing. So those are the things that I do know.
I love it. And when you even say like what I've been guided to, and Corinne, you're extra special, but like, you're not particularly extra special. Everybody has some guidance, whether it's like a wink, a sign, like being let go from the job, the breakup, the eviction notice, whatever it is. Like, we all get some signs from the universe of like, hey, actually go on this path. Like, here, go here. And I think you're right. I think sometimes, like, because I know for myself, like, I'm so futuristic. I'm like, okay, and that's what the plan looks like. And at the same time, we've got some twists and turns, and it's like, okay, well, that's what's next for me. And of course, I love to have you and Freedom and Yolanda on when you guys are rolling out the Love Lens, and kind of to talk about that journey with us. That'd
be awesome. That'd be awesome.
Sure. So as we come to a close, my friend, I'm curious from you, what's the piece of advice? Like, what would be that last piece of advice that you would have for other people who are looking to elevate, who are looking to step out of anxiety and into love and into that place of self-acceptance? What would the piece of advice be that you would give to them?
I will say these words that my stepdad said to me, and he said these words to me when I was over his house, my mom's house. This is during, I call it my 2010 or 2009, my adult age episode of anxiety. I was flat out on his couch, mascara stains, down my cheeks from crying because I was in the middle of a really horrendous anxiety episode, not functioning. And he looked at me, and he looked like into my soul, looked at me. And so I'm looking at everybody, who's listening, watching. I'm saying this to your soul, that the light in you is too bright to fail, that you can trust this light within. It will guide you. It's something that we all have, and it's too bright to fail, that we're going to make it our healing is what we're here to do. That's why we showed up on this planet in this particular time. We showed up to heal, and that can be trusted. So those are my words of advice. The light in you is too bright to fail. They're some of my favorite words.
Corinne, thank you. And I love that. And you're right. I think we forget that we have that light within us. And life happens, gets in the way, and all the stories and narratives. So you are an absolute queen. Thank you for being on with us today. If everyone is looking for you on the interwebs, where will they find you? Where do you like to hang out?
My hub would be my website, which is FromAnxietyToLove.com. And of course, I'm on all social media, Instagram and Facebook mostly.
Cool. We'll put all the links in the bio. Thanks again so much for joining us for today. And yeah, to be continued on the next adventure, because I would love to have you back to talk with us on the Love Lens.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank
Love you.